Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to my spoiler-free review for the new horror film Don't Breathe 2. This is in theaters right now and only in theaters, and it is a sequel to the 2016 original Don't Breathe. And if you are new to Dan Reviews It, I welcome you to the channel. Thank you for finding this video. Please consider subscribing down below there. Click that like button as well. That helps out the channel too. So let's talk about this movie. Like I said, there's not going to be spoilers really for the new film Don't Breathe 2, but the plot schematics of that sort of do depend on knowing a little bit about that first movie, so we are going to spoil the original Don't Breathe. So if you haven't seen that, you may want to click off of this video and go watch that movie. That was a great movie, very highly regarded by critics and audiences alike. This one, however, Don't Breathe 2, sits at about a 40% on Rotten Tomatoes with critics. So what is the difference between these movies? We're going to get into that question. But the only cast member really that returns for this film is Stephen Lang as the blind man, Norman, who really just is known sort of to audiences as the blind man. But yes, he does have a name too. But he's a military veteran who in the first film was the target of a robbery by these jerky kids. And we think for a lot of the movie, oh, these kids, what a bunch of villains. They're the jerks in this movie. But no, as the story progresses, we learn that Stephen Lang, the blind man, is actually the real villain of the story. It was an interesting twist, and I think one thing that made the original sort of rise above the rest. We're not going to talk about why he was the villain in the first one, but that's all we'll spoil there. But for the second movie, which, by the way, is co-written by the co-writer and director of the first film, Fede Alvarez. But this one is directed by newcomer Rodo Sayagues. And this is his directorial debut, but he worked on Alvarez's other movies, Don't Breathe, and the Evil Dead remake, both, by the way, which starred Jane Levy, who is now on Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist that just got canceled. But for a while, she was sort of the horror girl. But anyway, in this particular story, we flash about 8 years into the future, and this girl that was sort of also a survivor from that original Don't Breathe movie is grown up, and of course she's played by a different actress, but it's the same character. So she's 11 years old in this one, played by Madeline Grace. And the blind man has been raising her as his own. She gets to go into town every so often with this Navy SEAL friend of Norman's, but for the most part, she's, going to school at home. She is essentially kind of locked up in that house, except for very special occasions. So, as the plot progresses, we see this group of villains that are trying to kidnap her. We don't know quite why at first, and we learn that as the story goes on. I won't go into that, but they sort of have their own reasons for doing such. I'm not sure if I even want to say what I thought it was, but I'll just let you, maybe watch the movie. But the blind man, once again has to secure his home and make sure, these people don't get in. And then he, one by one starts taking them down and injuring them and what have you, all to kind of protect this girl who, by the way, is already trying to sort of be out on her own and already had a big fight with him about running away. And I want to, go to a regular school and all of this. So as the plot progresses again, basically by the end of this movie, we are to see the blind man as this villain turned hero, maybe an anti-hero, I don't know. But the truth is I just didn't buy any of it. He, was a very, very evil villain in the first one. And we see him here again, trying to, showcase some sort of good streak, but like he's been lying to the girl, and he's still this sort of villainous character, and I just don't think it worked. Now, in horror, yes, as we progress with some of these series, some people that are originally villains turn out to be a little bit less so. I think Freddy's a great example of that. Freddy, of course, yes, is still kind of a villain, but by the fourth, fifth movie, it got so campy. He was more of like a jokey villain. But here, there's none of that. I mean, this is not a funny movie. This is not a jokey movie. It is very R-rated. It's very violent and very visceral in that regard. But the main problem with this movie, and I can see why it's so much further down with critics than the first one. It's certainly further down with this one, this critic, is because nobody really is good. I mean, the girl is, but like both sides that are fighting for this girl, nobody's good. And as a result, I just didn't connect with anybody. I sort of hated everybody. And boy, this plot is really stretched thin. I mean, first of all, there didn't need to be a sequel. The first one, was a great standalone movie. Not every movie needs a GD sequel. I think that's a fair statement. But this one especially, they didn't really even have a great story to go along with it. Like, I feel like I just recently watched American Horror Stories, the anthology series that they're doing now with Ryan Murphy. And I feel like this could fit maybe in sort of that category, like as a 45-minute story. But the stretching of this plot to, an hour and 35 minutes or whatever it is just ridiculous. It never, I can't say it ever got boring, but it just, every, passing scene was like, why do we need this? Why does this exist? Oh, we're still doing this. It is this sort of exercise in really just kind of dealing with a movie that didn't need to exist in the first place and then never giving you a real reason for it to. And look, there have been a lot of movies that I've reviewed in the last 10 years that didn't need to exist, but, they did something different with it or fun or unique or whatever. And here it's almost more of the same, but with a much worse plot and an anti-hero type story to try and redeem the blind man, which I just never felt. I never felt his redemption that they so clearly wanted you to in this movie. It tries way too hard. Really, the only positive I can say about it, and it's so dark in this movie, it was even hard to see some of the things going on. I will say that, yes, some of the blood and guts, I think maybe will satisfy people because it does get very visceral, and I didn't mind some of that, although I hate like eye gouging stuff, and there's a fair amount of that in this movie. So I guess maybe that's a little spoilery, but but the other thing is, look, Stephen Lang is a good actor and he does a good job. I mean, he's been doing things since A Few Good Men back in the day. So he's been around. He's a good actor. He's always good. And he was great in the first movie, but they gave his character, I think, much more of an arc, much more of a reason to exist. And here, I just don't think we feel that. So for all of these reasons, I leave Don't Breathe 2 with a D. It's in that pantheon of real bad horror movies. Every year, there's a bunch of F's and D's in the horror camp. And that is this for me. I still think the best horror movie of the year has to be Quiet Place 2. I believe I gave that an A-. Most of the other ones were sort of somewhere in the middle, like Spiral and stuff. But I have given a couple F's this year, too, for horror movies as well. So this isn't quite as bad as those, but right on that cusp. So I can see why it was not a hit with critics as the first one was. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you back here next time on Dan Reviews It. Bye.